The following Conscious Consumer Network recording of a live broadcast is available to purchase in high definition at ethymarket.com. Support free and independent media by becoming a CCN pledger. For €10 a month, you can have unlimited access to CCN high definition downloads at ethymarket.com. Ethymarket, the ethical marketplace for conscious consumers. Hello and good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everybody, wherever on the planet you may be. My name is Mel V, and this is the Global Initiatives Review on the 3rd of July 2015 here on Conscious Consumer Network. Thank you to all of you who have tuned in for this special broadcast. We will be going through some interesting territory tonight, so do stick around. I'm going to set the tone for tonight's particular display of information with a poem which means a lot to me. We're obviously going to be tackling Swissindo tonight, and this is a poem that I once read to the delegation, and it really does kind of encapsulate a lot of the journey that I've been on, and really the advice that I would give to anybody who may potentially be thinking of getting involved in any projects. It's a poem by Rudyard Kipling, and it goes like this. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowances for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired of waiting, or be lied about and don't deal in lies, or be hated and don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make traps for fools, or watch the things you have given life to broken, or stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word of your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you, except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose nor common touch, if neither foe nor living friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance well run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Okay, so to start the story off, where it kind of begins, with every story that we engage in, the parameters are never defined. One thing leads into another. Cycles lead into cycles. But for the sake of this particular journey this evening, we'll start with the One People's Public Trust. Everybody remember this. I am free, opt-in. Yeah, well, when OPPT came about, and this has been obviously discussed in great lengths with Lisa Harrison and Danny Arnold McKenney, who were intimately involved with this whole thing. Well, what happened when OPPT supposedly foreclosed on the system? We had a gentleman by the name of Mr. Sino stepping forward and bequeathing a whole bunch of money to humanity. And this was done through an organization which he is supposedly the head of, called Swissindo. And these are the two badges that I've been able to acquire from Swissindo. They were used on the websites. And Biggie and I, my partner, were recruited as delegates to be part of the Swissindo delegation. Myself, I was recruited on, or at least I officially started on the 24th of June. I had been invited, I think it was about a month prior to that. but had decided to move premises and start on a new computer before I actually got into the delegation, so to speak. But it was the 24th of June 2013 when I kind of started going to meetings and got set up on what was then the platform that they used called TeamSpeak. My partner Biggie, producer extraordinaire of this network, became a delegate in September 2013. And the only reason we decided to bring him in as a delegate was because there was a need for a website to be built. And that was the company that we had at the time that had gone bankrupt, which was a media marketing company capable of building websites. And Biggie's very competent with that sort of thing. So in order to access some of the highly confidential documents, it was decided to make him a delegate in order that he can build the website, as nobody else came forward to do it or was willing to do it. With that, Biggie actually ended up becoming the Prime Minister for Law for the African delegation. I was the coordinator. I was made the coordinator pretty soon after joining. I think people automatically saw that I had a lot of strengths and organizational skills and I could run meetings and whatnot. So I was made a coordinator and I ran the African delegation for 3 months. I recruited a number of delegates who became delegates on the African delegation. And then Biggie and I were eventually moved from the African delegation into Mr. Sugi's advisory council, or Mr. Sino's advisory council. Mr. Sugi and Mr. Sino are the same person, they're just different names. Now, here we go. M1, he's got different titles. The full name is Mr. Sugihatono Notonogoro, known as the King of Kings, apparently the 681st King of Kings, supposedly from a long line of servant kings who have been entrusted with holding global assets and a number of collateral accounts. He's also known as M1, Papa Sugi, Papa, Mr. Sugi, various things, Bapak. There's a number of very affectionate titles which have been afforded this man by the delegation and by his loyal followers. And Papa Sugi has bequeathed the resources of the global collateral accounts and global assets, which he is the sole mandate single signatory of, or so he claims. He has bequeathed these resources back to humanity. Okay, and he's done this in the form of something called Swissindo Exhibits AB, and they were scheduled in something called Payments 1 to 11, which detail the distribution of payments under the concept of human obligation payments and for the purposes of global development. And there's a number of treaties and various bits and pieces which have been signed, and many banks and stuff which underwrite this, many organizations which are supposedly part of this, including the United Nations, UBS, Union Bank Switzerland, is apparently part of this, and something called the Bullion Bank, as you can see over here, and we'll deal with that a little bit later. But this is the original document we got regarding the World Certificate, the Contract Project of Exhibits AB, Certificate of Global Immunity. And at the bottom here, it shows you the amount total of certified shares. I mean, that's a figure that I don't even know the words to pronounce, that much money. But here we go. This is kind of what we're looking at. So, again, as I said, Swissindo is apparently United Nations affiliated. Here is some documentation: United Nations Inter-Office Memorandum, Office of Internal Oversight Services, Internal Audit Division, okay, Authorization of Defense, the Police and the Military, Certificate of Excellence on Execution. This is a certificate of excellence issued by Swissindo to the United Nations when they started putting together the various military orders and bits and pieces. We'll show you some of the things which I was involved with, some of the orders and memorandums which I created on behalf of the media. But this was supposedly the certificate of execution which authorized all of those mandates that we created. So here we go. Official Swissindo documentation authorizing a certificate of execution to do with the police and military. So this would have been the enforcement for whatever we were getting involved with. And this project, which recruited the delegates and that Papa created, was named Neo, the United Kingdom of God, Sky, Earth. And yeah, interesting, pretty title. I don't know if it's necessarily the most realistic or appropriate label to put onto the outside world, because we've had a number of people go, God, Sky, Earth, what kind of name is that? You know, United Kingdom of God, Sky, Earth. Just to the outside world, it's not taken too seriously. People struggle to conscientize that this is in fact a real organization because of the labeling. A little bit, I don't know, prosaic in my opinion, but nonetheless, God Sky Earth was set up. GodSkyEarth.org is the official website for the God Sky Earth United Kingdom of God Sky Earth, with all the documentation and press releases and stuff. God Sky Earth, the official website, was built by my partner Biggie and is actually registered in Mr. Sino's name. It is the only website which is actually registered in Mr. Sino's name. Several other delegates have set up their own websites. I know Rena Iliades from the Australian delegation has set one up for Australia, and it is in fact registered in her name. It's actually registered as H.E. Irene Iliades, Her Excellency Irene Iliades, because she is in fact supposedly the Emperor of Australia. We've got Karen Colland, who's also got one registered in her name, which is her personal blog on Swissindo, which is godskyEarth.info. So various delegates have gone and set up their own various websites, which it's not the official websites. This is the official website as it's actually registered in Mr. Sugi's name. No delegate has ownership over it. Just to obviously, point out here, I beg your pardon, here again. You'll see on this page here, which we've taken from the official website, a number of what we call CVAC videos, okay? Indonesia CVAC video, Egypt CVAC video. I made all of those. I was required to make a number of media items during my time with the delegation. In fact, that's why they recruited me, was because obviously I had Freedom Central and I was doing lots of media, and they needed a few sort of prominent speaker, figure, whatever label you want to put on me. So they pulled me in and set me to work making a whole bunch of media, including the website. And in total, I think 10 videos. It's a hell of a lot of media work. And here's some of the beautiful artwork. This was, I think, Dan to Andrea created these, and we used these in some of the campaigns that we created. So let's get on to the actual how things were when we were working with a delegation. The first thing that I encountered when I got in there, let it just be said that the first 2 months of working with the delegates, everyone was just so in love with each other. We couldn't get enough of each other. And it really was because we were all just so in love with this idea and this dream of something actually finally happening. It was a really amazing time, but that was very short-lived. In fact, that went out the window pretty damn quickly when we realized that there were certain things that were going on that just didn't make sense. For example, there were a lot of unnecessary pressure and hoops put upon us. There was a culture of rushing people to get things done before a certain deadline, but then nothing would happen. Like everybody had to all go off and have head and shoulder photographs taken for the diplomatic passes. And that had to be done like by the following Monday. And it was like the Saturday, and some people couldn't get it done over the weekend, and it all had to be in on a certain day. And, nothing's happened. We all had to get our measurements in and do body measurements, because apparently we were having suits and outfits and all sorts made. I mean, they've got every single detail of us. They've got our passport details. They've got our personal banking details, because they're supposed to be sending us money. They've got our measurements. They could pretty much make a coffin to fit me perfectly, because that is how much detail they have on me, kind of thing. But it was always a case of, and then we had to fill out forms, and it was like, we weren't given time to think about whether it was right or not to hand over our banking details. It was, no, it's got to be done today and get it to us now. And, well, we've given them our banking details and we've never received any money. So this became very uncomfortable. When it started to get super uncomfortable was when we were told to create what was known as the CVACs, which basically Creation Value Asset Center, and this is something that was originally sort of came about in the OPPT area of things and adopted as something that the Swissindo project wished to develop, which would be, you know, these information hubs and all these various ways of developing projects. And there was a lot of very good construction work done. For example, one of these like CVAC pro formas and project checklists to see if projects were viable and purposeful. And a lot of that sort of thing, a lot of very good training came out of it, I must say. And it was a hugely beneficial experience of learning how to work on projects remotely with a group of people from across the world, which, you know, most people never actually get that kind of experience. So very interesting project managing things, you know, remotely. And it gave me a huge amount of grounding for creating Conscious Consumer Network. And there was also a lot of pressure put on me to produce media projects or promotional pieces. And as I said, I did a total of 10, which is more than anybody else did. And there was always like time deadlines, but, you know, still nothing's happened. And it was a lot of pressure, a lot of stress and to get things done. So I say, hurry up and wait, a whole bunch of hurry up and wait. So hopes were constantly being fed by creating a culture of pressure and hurry up and wait and get it done, as it's about to happen any moment now, and then absolutely nothing would happen. You know, so there's and this was a repeating pattern constantly. This created a lot of animosity and distrust within the delegation, and a lot of people started infighting and picking because promises have been made by certain people in positions of perceived power with perceived labels, and if anybody kind of had a go at these people about things not happening, they were just pushed out the delegation. But they had the right to speak up about, you know, this sort of thing, which was very confusing to us when we were told to get shit done and nothing then happened after all the pressure was put on us to get it done. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about, I won't get into too much of the politics and semantics, but because that for me is one of the key factors right from the outset. But I do want to introduce you to some of the delegates and some of the more pervasive issues that were prevalent throughout the time that I served as a delegate within the Swissindo delegation. Let's start off with the person who recruited me. I was recruited into the delegation by Ross Hanley, who was at the time the Emperor of Australia. He is no longer the Emperor of Australia. He has since been removed. And of course, this title was given to him by Mr. Sugihartono Notonogoro, King of Kings. And let me just say, during Mr. Hanley's time as emperor, he engaged in a reign of absolute terror. We lived in absolute fear of him. If, you know, we dared to stand up to him. He got incredibly nasty, was incredibly ego-driven, power-hungry, and liked to abuse other delegates, call them rather disgusting, filthy names, particularly when they'd been drinking, which he did on a daily basis at times, self-admitted alcoholic. Ross was also, you know, rather selfish, didn't care about anybody else except himself. This became evident when everybody when the time came to go off to Indonesia, and he just said, I don't give a shit about anybody else, I'm going, you know, and that was like, whoa, you know, pretending to, you know, care about the world means that we care about each other too, and that means the people you work with, the delegates. Anyway, one of the worst aspects of Ross was continually manipulating delegates into conflicts for his own power agendas. And he was actually eventually removed by Mr. Sugi because of all the conflict that he caused within the delegation. He was removed from his position as emperor. As far as I know, he's still a member of the delegation. But Ross made a number of false promises to the delegates, including that all delegates would get paid $1.2 million per year just for being a delegate, and that we were all going on an all-expenses paid trip to Cirebon for the Super Samar, which happened on the 11th of March 2014. Here's two other people who were kind of in the Australian delegation leadership at the time that I joined, and I do want to spend a bit of time and pause and speak about them. This was kind of Ross Hanley's right-hand man, Peter Van Runt, and the third in charge, John Fernandez. Now, the fates of these two have been very, very different. Peter Van Runt since resigned from the delegation, and John Fernandez was pushed out the delegation by the new Empress, Rina Iliades. we don't have any contact with Peter anymore. He colluded a lot with Ross in a lot of manipulation. We have actually had some of our presenters at Conscious Consumer Network contacted by Ross and Peter wanting to cause conflict, after they kind of were pushed up the delegation. We just ignored them. They always had their own agendas, and it really revolved around power and control. I beg your pardon. This guy here, John Fernandez, is an absolute sweetie, and he was really used by Peter and Ross to fulfill his agendas, to fulfill their agendas. I think he had great potential had he gone into the delegation and not been under the wing of the other two. Still one of the kindest, sweetest, most helpful people I've ever known, and we are very good friends. John will love him dearly, and I think the way that he's been treated by his fellow Australian delegates is absolutely appalling. He did nothing but serve them and was dedicated, absolutely dedicated to the delegation. I know I worked very closely with him, and without a doubt, one of the fairest people I've ever come across and ever had the opportunity to work with. And when they moved him from the delegation, I knew there was no chance of any justice or fairness, and it was always going to be a little click. Because for me, he really did hold the balance of fairness within the delegation. An incredibly fair person, John is. And here's the new Empress of Australia, Rina Eliades. And of course, she became the Empress when Ross Hanley was removed from his post. She was appointed by Arnie Forrest, who I'll get onto in a bit. Unfortunately, Rina has proven to be no better than Ross, with ongoing power plays, manipulation, and abuse of perceived power. And I would just like to say, Rina's most offensive crime, in my eyes, is the unscrupulous gossip she engaged in. I personally sat through a number of meetings where I heard her slag off my dear friend Lisa Harrison, making all sorts of comments about her and Brian Kelly and their sex life, and how Lisa just abandoned her children and all sorts of shit like this, when she knew nothing about the circumstances of what was going on in Morocco. And I actually left a couple of meetings hearing Rina gossip, unfortunately. And one of the things which I experienced, which draws into a later theme I do want to point out, was although I became very close to Rina at one point, I mistakenly trusted her with some very personal, deep information. I was in a chat room with her and Jane Evershed one day, and I shared the information of my abuse as a child. And I don't know what Rina thought the point of this was, but the very next day in an Australian delegation meeting, she thought it was the appropriate place to tell the entire delegation the story which I told her in confidence. And I was there listening to it. It's like the woman just had no perception of what must be kept discreet. Maybe I should have sworn her to the confidentiality agreement, but went and told the whole delegation the story that I told her in confidence because I trusted her as a friend and really wanted her to know a little bit about my history. And that was a big mistake because, like some people just can't hold on to information. They feel, they know something about someone. They just have to tell it to get the energetic hit that comes with it, And this energetic vampiring thing is a theme that comes up a lot, and we will get into that a little bit more. But, the unfortunate information of my abuse then got into the delegation, got very twisted and used against me. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. Okay, another delegate, Arnie Forrest. Oh, this one drove me crazy. Of Indonesian descent, but Australian citizen. She's a dressmaker and was appointed the global head of finance and banking. Now, if anyone's watched any of my previous presentations, you'll often hear me say, if your car breaks down, you don't hire a makeup artist, you hire a mechanic. This one was so incompetent at the very basics that I just, I have no idea how she ended up being the global head of finance and banking. Was she going to trade in her tape measure and freaking scissors for a calculator? I don't know. But this for me never made sense. And there just seemed to be very little competence in this woman's abilities. And for bullshit bloodhounds like myself, we became a threat to people like her. And she actually participated in the plot to steal my media project from me and pass it on to someone else who she could actually control. Completely lacking in competence and integrity, and one of the most manipulative people I've ever come across. And it's very well known, even within the people in Indonesia, that she's a compulsive liar. They've caught her out lying again and again. And yet I'm not even sure why Suki continues to keep her in her position, considering how many times this chick has been caught out. Right, Gwen D. Caldwell. Let's get into this little number. American delegation prime minister. Between her and Ross Hanley, they conspired plenty. Okay, Ross conspired and manipulated everyone into voting to get this woman into the position that she was in. He went around getting everyone to vote for her, and there's a lot of people who will admit to that. But this woman attempted to steal my documentary project by giving Sean Nipper, an American delegation. She gave the project to Sean Nipper to submit for a funding proposal. Okay, he actually submitted a funding proposal for my documentary to Mr. Sino, and I was already making the documentary for free. Sean initially approached me to work with me on making the documentary, but then stole the documentary and decided to make money off it by quoting Mr. Sino $500,000 for the same work I was going to do for free. All of this was part of an ongoing plot to rid me as head of media, okay, which Arnie Forrest gladly participates in, which this little lady, Gwen Caldwell, gladly participated in. All right, let's get into these T-shirts here. You see all the Indonesians wearing them, and here's Biggie wearing his. And these were made for all the delegates. This is a beautiful design, actually. Rena did a lovely job with the One People tree. Cause no harm, cause no loss, do not impede the freedom of another. Really lovely, but we couldn't actually wear them. I can't wear anything that's not natural fabric. This is a really heavy polyester blend. They were too small. They were made for Indonesian-sized people. So even when Biggie got an XXL, it was still too tight on him, as you can see over here, putting on his love handles. It was a bit skin tight on him. But not only that, we got to Indonesia and we were given a box of these things, and our T-shirts were inside them. Literally handed a box. We took it back to our hotel and had to pull our T-shirts out, and we were asked to take the rest of the T-shirts in the box back with us. And we didn't at that time. There was so much going on. Thing to ask, what happens when we get it back with us? Is everybody else going to pay for the postage and shipping for their own T-shirts? Because what became clear was that no one in Indonesia was prepared to pay for the postage and shipping to get these T-shirts to other delegates because they'd been left in Indonesia. But Arnie asked us to take these T-shirts with us from Indonesia. The box of T-shirts was a total of 5 kilos in luggage. And basically, we arrived with 29 kilos of luggage. The limit is 33. And by the time we left, we had 35 because of all the T-shirts. And we arrived late at the airport because of the traffic in Jakarta when we were leaving. And we just barely made the checkout at the check-in counter, and we had to repack our suitcase at the check-in because our suitcase was too heavy with all these T-shirts, and we had to move a whole bunch of them into hand luggage. And it was a real stress to get these T-shirts back to Holland with us. Had we known how much drama it would be, we would have not agreed to have taken them with, but we thought we'd do a nice thing by taking them with. And when we got back home to find that I was expected to pay for the postage and packaging to send them on to other delegates. And when I asked for other delegates to please pay for the postage and shipping, none was forthcoming. Instead, we were accused of stealing the T-shirts, which Arnie had asked us to bring back from Indonesia. Okay, and simply at the time, we did not have the money to send the T-shirts on further, the total cost being $100 in shipping to get all the T-shirts off to the States. Anyway, we still have the T-shirts if anybody wants theirs, and just send us the shipping via PayPal and we will get them to you. But we're not paying for anybody's T-shirts to be shipped out. That was not the condition of us helping to transport them further. So why I bring up the T-shirt issue is because for me, the T-shirt issue was a metaphor. Okay, the shirt episode was a metaphor. The whole issue of the One People T-shirts for me became a metaphor of just how dysfunctional the entire delegation is. Great concepts and ideas, pretty pictures and concepts, but the logistical factors are still largely unaccounted for, such as transportation, transfer of funds, distribution of products. These are very basic factors to consider when running even the most basic of organizations and businesses. These factors were clearly not even manageable, not even on a small scale, by people who were supposedly responsible for reshaping the world. Okay, let's get on to this character. Gary Simon, aka Jagamara. he was made the International Prime Minister of Law. And this was a title given to him by Papa Sugi. And how I came to know of Jagamara was he tried to implement the Ucadia model as the legal framework for God, Sky, Earth. If anyone's done their research, they'll know that the Ucadia model is rooted in the Vatican canons. So, it's the old system just sort of rehashed in it with a different veneer. And, even Greg Paul, New Earth Nations law person, won't touch Ucadia. So it was quite interesting to see that Jagamara wanted to bring the Ucadia system into Swissindo, along with Rebecca Cope, who is also one of the heads of law within New Earth Nation. Anyway, we practically went to war with Jagamara and Rebecca, who was the Prime Minister of Law for the American Delegation, over the fact they wanted to implement Ucadia as a legal framework. And I'll go on to that in a minute. Let's talk a bit about Gary. He went over for the Super Samar with no money or anything and basically got stuck at Papa Sugi's for 6 months. When we were there, when we went over to visit Papa, we had actually Papa's entourage, people who were close to Papa, including Mr. Mardi, Mr. Widodo, who actually came to us and asked us to help get rid of Jagamara from Papa's home because he just didn't seem to leave. Him and Natalie were stuck there, and another friend of theirs, Andrew, had come to join them whilst living there at Papa Sugi's home. They were stuck there because they had no money to get back, and the Australian embassy had to bail them out. Anyway, so as a result of the Australian embassy having to bail him out, Jagamara was denied the right to leave Australia when he was recently trying to attend the function in Laos, which we will get onto in a little while. Let's talk a bit about the Ucadia matter. Basically, I'm very good friends with Franco Collins, and he never gave permission for Swissindo to use Ucadia. Okay, and when Swissindo just went ahead and put Ucadia into all their paperwork, Frank actually contacted me to get the matter sorted out, okay? And here I am knowing Ucadia is not a good thing for Swissindo, but also knowing that Frank hasn't given permission for Swissindo to use Ucadia, while still trying to maintain a good relationship with Frank and being blamed by Jagamara for ruining his relationship with Franco Collins when Franco Collins was nothing to do with Jagamara. He can say nothing nice about the guy, but he does it in a very polite way because Frank is a very nice dude. And if you want to know a little bit more about Jagamara, please feel free to contact Jerry Pruce, very dear friend of mine, and Lisa Harrison's. He was a former legal advisor to Humanitad, Sasha Stone's organization. And of course, please do speak to Franco Collins, who Jagamara claims is his best friend. Jagamara has also recently claimed that Ucadia has foreclosed on the Vatican. I have it under strict authority from Franco Collins that this is not the case. Let's deal with this little delegate here, Pieta Morgan. Really sweet, petite little thing. She was fire, though, a real firecracker. I really adore Pieta. Just the biggest heart, really, the biggest heart, unbelievable compassion for animals, for nature. It just oozes out of her. Very few people are quite as genuine as this one. And yet I actually feel really sorry for her. She's had a really tough time in her life, and there's a lot of anger there. She's been really hurt by people. But one of the good things about Pieta Morgan joining the delegation was meeting her partner and fellow delegate Sean O'Connor, who was also a delegate, but they have both since resigned as delegates from Swissindo. And this was following on from abusive behavior by the then Emperor of Australia, being Ross Hanley. And it was just so beautiful how the whole thing happened, because Ross was actually verbally abusing me in a meeting and I was in tears, and Pieta stepped in. And as a result, got into a fight with him and ended up leaving the delegation because of the way that he behaved. And bless her, thank you, Pieta. I'll never forget you for doing that. You're one of the few people who truly has the courage to stand up and do the right thing. Okay? But one of the things which concerned me was Pieta then went on afterwards to state a number of facts publicly with regard to Swissindo, claiming certain things about them, which I myself don't know if they're not true. But at the time, I wasn't sure if they were true. And I felt that perhaps she was just angry and lashing out. because a lot of the things that she was saying were a bit just far-reaching. She was connecting dots, which for me didn't really connect. They may have connected in her mind. I'm not saying she's wrong, but she's an extremely intelligent woman. That is one thing I must say. She was an extremely intelligent woman, still is, and a real loss to the delegation, in my humble opinion. But basically, she claimed that Swissindo was evil and is part of the New World Order and all this kind of thing. The honest truth is that I can't blame her for saying this, even if it's not true, because the evidence sure does exist, and I shall go on to explain now why. All right, this is one of the people who was a member of the African delegation. What a tricksy lady this is, Anthea Tor. Anthea is a New Age cult leader and has been dedicated to the Ascended Masters cult for many years. Now, the Ascended Masters cult is indeed controlled by the Jesuits. Feel free to check with any expert in Jesuitical matters, including Eric John Phelps, who I personally confirmed this with. And I've been able to prove this from my own research to be true. Basically, she does make annual pilgrimages to California to speak at cult gatherings, which she pays for herself to go there and do. In her home, she has an Ascended Masters cult temple. I do believe she's now sold her home. But the home where her and at least half the African delegation once lived this temple was on a residential property in Noordhoek, South Africa, where she held meetings 2 to 3 times a week, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if it's 2 or 3 times a week. And they never missed a single meeting, not even on Christmas. They went and they gave their affirmations. I am, the mighty I am, all this kind of stuff. And she really used to push this stuff in the delegation. She was like a Jehovah's Witness evangelist for the New Age. I've never quite come across anything like it. But basically, a number of the African delegations lived in her house and were indoctrinated into this cult. And there were some delegates, one particular, Mark Anthony Collins, who was not a part of a cult, basically had nowhere to live, had a severe drug problem. I think he was kicked out of home, then went to live with her, got indoctrinated into a cult, then went over to Indonesia, and I think came back and is now back in Indonesia with Papa, having been made the African emperor, the emperor of Africa, after he asked Papa if he could have the title as African emperor, and we'll go into him in a little bit. But this woman is without a doubt a cult leader, and everybody in the delegation knows it. Here's one of the people that lived with Anthea, a gentleman by the name of Ashton Moses. You can see he wears around his neck all the time this cross, which looks very much like the Maltese cross or the cross of St. John, but it's in purple. It is, in fact, the cross of Saint Germain. All right, and we'll go on to talk about who Saint Germain is. The Maltese cross, as you can see, the shape of the Maltese cross, which developed from the Knights. You can see it's the same freaking cross with the 8 points. No mistaking it. Just so we're clear, yeah, please be clear that this is the 8-pointed cross, like the Maltese cross, very distinctive. Now, if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about the history of how this cross evolved to look like this, please go and watch my series called Dragonology. I go through the entire history of symbolism of the cross and how it's evolved, and the literal, allegorical, phonetic, philological references, homonyms, synonyms, everything that relate to it. Okay, this is the Mystery Triangle Book of Saint Germain, and this thing is absolutely amazing. It's all of Saint Germain's spells and cult rituals. But Saint Germain was actually himself of the dragon bloodline, okay? The royal serpentine dragon king god bloodlines. Right? And you can see that from the fact that he's got a dragon on his upside-down triangle book, all right? And Duncan O'Finian, astral warrior and fellow presenter on the Conscious Consumer Network, has actually told me in the past that the being calling himself Saint Germain is actually a demonic entity. And Duncan would know because he does battle with these guys in the astral realm, all right? And he helps people get rid of these entities. And the New Age is pulling in a lot of entities at the moment. And the Saint Germain is near enough a cluster type entity that just vampires energy of people. Anyway, even if it wasn't for a fact that he was a patron saint of a New Age cult, the very fact that he has sainthood is problematic because sainthoods can only be administered through the office of the Holy See, and usually involves a complex series of rituals and processes, for example, canonization, which happens post-mortem prior to being declared a saint by the Vatican. All right, evidence of insanity or manipulation. Over here, we've got a number of the Ascended Masters. And these are, yeah, anyway, I'm not gonna offend anybody's beliefs by getting into the specifics about any of these guys, but the African delegates, Ascended Masters, cult members, were apparently told by the Ascended Masters, which is this group of people here, okay, that Biggie and I were in fact MI5 agents, and that we planned to blow up a plane full of delegates, and that we should be removed from the delegation, okay? And on these grounds, Biggie and I were removed from the African delegation, right? Because the Ascended Masters had apparently told the cult members of the African delegation that Biggie and I were MI5 agents, which is not true, all right? You know, I believe MI5 agents make six-figure salaries. I'd like to see the bank account, please, with all that money in it, because I certainly don't have access to it. And we plan to blow up a plane full of delegates. Now, that would assume that you could get all the delegates onto one plane, which never happened considering we're coming from all over the world. So they were talking about a hypothetical situation that was never going to happen, and that hypothetical situation that was never going to happen was potentially threatened by myself and my husband being suicide bombers and blowing that plane up. Right. On these grounds, Biggie and I were removed from the African delegation. No jokes. And it got worse. Unfortunately, November of 2013, came the period of time when we had to out Kevin Annett. Having worked with him extensively and promoted his work, organized speaking events for him, made 2 documentaries with him, and started an entire television network dedicated to the ITCCS, which was itccs.tv. It was very sad that we had to actually admit to what this guy really is. The outing of Kevin Annett was done after Daryl Zeleny and I were taken through some evidence by Tony Boutros, and we could not dispute the lies and fraud of Kevin Annett any further. Of course, Daryl Zeleny, being the head of military for Swissindo, I couldn't deny anymore the evidence in front of me, and it was being presented to me in front of him. And basically, I had to come clean on what I knew about Kevin Annett, as I've been covering up for him for a very long time, okay? And, of course, because I came out about what I knew, which was quite a lot, I was subjected to his usual attacks and slander. And Biggie and I were, of course, labeled Vatican assassins, child traffickers, guilty of crimes against humanity, agents of the Dutch Catholic Church. And there was not one piece of evidence to back any of these claims up. He just wrote all these things on a freaking website. And the worst bit is the delegates of the African delegation, the cult members, Anthea's cult, New Age, New Ascended Masters cult members, seized upon the opportunity to use Kevin Annett's lies as a reason to not allow us back into the delegation after we were removed, insisting that we were actually pulled before a tribunal. Now, how can you pull anyone before a tribunal if there's no evidence against them? Haven't you heard of habeas corpus, you nitwits? Seriously, no body, no crime. No victim, no crime. There's no body. There's no crime. There's no, show me who I've trafficked. Please be my guest. Show me who I've trafficked. Show me my bank account. I believe Vatican assassins earn anything between $1 million to 10 million a hit. Show me the money. I'd love to frickin' see it. So it was all just unfortunate smear campaign by Kevin Annett that the delegates seized upon, and it was excruciatingly traumatic to undergo this kind of unfair labeling and use of such lies against us to hurt us and be used to the advantage of people. Now, these are some of the African delegates who ended up going to the Super Samoa, and we'll talk about this, okay, a little bit here, Okay, the African delegates that went to Indonesia for the Super Samar, and here they are. This is Jakarta train station. I recognize it because of the green poles. Here they are waiting for a train, I think. This is Anthea Tor. Here's Ashton Moses. You'll notice he's always wearing his little cross of Saint Germain, which is actually a Maltese cross, a knight's cross. He lived with Anthea, okay, as did this lady here, Delia McIntyre, as did this guy here, Norman. I forget what his surname is. But here's Mark Anthony Collins, the guy who became the African emperor, Emperor of Africa, a guy with connections to extremist white groups in South Africa, a white face as the Emperor of Africa. Yeah, Mr. Sugi, that was a real sharp move. Anyway, this is a guy called Benjamin Style. And these guys somehow all went to Indonesia for the Super Samar. And we'll get into that in a moment. Okay, Super Samar on the 11th of March, 2014. All right. A number of delegates went, a number of delegates did not. And this was very confusing because we were, let's just get into the whole, what actually happened. All right. I was trying to see where everything is. Okay. First off, a number of delegates we've been working on the delegation from mid-June 2013, and we were told it was going to happen in September, it's going to happen in October, and people were literally holding on, and people unemployed, living the last little bits of money, all sorts. Nothing happened. In fact, I was waiting I was told I was going to get diplomatic immunity and I wouldn't have to worry about renewing my visa, and my visa expired in October. So I didn't renew it, and I got into quite a bit of trouble for that. To be in this country, I really did. So people may remember the incident of me being arrested last year as a result of my diplomatic paperwork, living in the country lapsing, but only because we were promised diplomatic paperwork by Swissindo and diplomatic passports, which we've not got the passports yet. And a number of people were basically told that, yeah, came December 2013, on New Year's Eve, we were told, oh, we're all going to go to Cirebon for the Super Samar on the 11th of March, and we'll all be given $20,000 to cover our expenses and to look after the kids and whatever else needed to be left at home, and we're always going to be good with the world, and we're all going to go together. Yeah. So beginning of January, we all started working together going towards the Super Samar. 2 weeks beforehand, no money had arrived, and we started to realize that we're not going to get the money, because by this stage, it was too much of a stretch to expect people to make last minute arrangements to go to Indonesia for 6 days or whatever. In fact, we were at that stage told we were going to be required to be there for 3 months, and we need to make arrangements to be away for 3 months. So people did, yeah. And as we grew closer towards the time, it became obvious that we weren't going to get the money, and that Sugi basically expected those who could afford to pay for themselves to go over to do so. And a number of delegates did. A number of delegates paid for themselves to go over. And they were expecting, because they were told they were going to be given 1.2 million. And when they got to Indonesia, there was no money to be given to them. A number of delegates got stuck there. People gave up jobs. People gave up homes, right? But a number of us got left behind as well. And I was one of those people. And it was very, very tough for us to be left behind. But what happened whilst some of those delegates were in Indonesia was some very strange things, because I do want to come to this. They got together in the room of our hotel, an empty conference room, and basically used some sticky tape to tape up this flag of the United Nations, found some flowers in the hotel, dressed the set a bit, stick up this God, Sky, Earth thing, which my dear friend Cyril, one of the people who works on Conscious Consumer Network, he made this artwork as part of my art team for God, Sky, Earth, okay? And basically they stood there like United Nations diplomats giving speeches, recording them, and then asking me to upload them onto YouTube under the Delegation's Diary channel. And I had a real moral and ethical problem with this. Having been a fashion stylist and art director, I know how easy it is to dress a set and create a certain image when you wanted to take pictures. And this is exactly what they'd done. There was no authenticity to anything they did. You can see this this flag is sticky taped to the podium. It's not even attached to the podium. It was given to them, and they found some sellotape and attached it to the podium, dressed the set, and all stand there saying speeches. And it's a big freaking charade. Okay, there's a whole lot. You can find all these speeches on delegation diaries. I felt completely embarrassed for the people who participated in this charade, to be honest with you. Here's some more delegates at the Super Samar. I'll go through them. Phil Stallard, of course, Ashton Moses, never without his cross. Here's Anthea, Delia McIntyre, Norman, Benjamin Stahl, Arnie Forrest with this crown of whatever on her head. And this is one of the few people like John Fernandez who I just absolutely adore. Josefa van Roy, heart of gold, absolutely love this woman to bits. Here's some more photos of the delegates. Mark, Anthony Collins, we got Anne Bressington here. This woman here, I want to talk about this woman here. She wasn't even a delegate, all right? And she's one of the people who stood in front of the podium. She actually basically provides a place for this delegate to stay at. This is Antoinette Langer. And this delegate lived with her and took her along to the Super Samar. She wasn't even a delegate. And it caused quite a bit of conflict because a number of people, we had a voting of who should be delegates and who shouldn't. And she wasn't approved as a delegate, but suddenly she was one of the people who get to go to Indonesia, and a whole bunch of delegates were left behind. It was very sneaky and very unfair. But anyway, it was done, and everyone was very pissed off about it. Here again, Antoinette Langer. These are all Anthea's cult members that basically are part of her Ascended Masters cult. Here's Anthea Tor again, Ashton Moses, never without his cross. There's Delia McIntyre, Antoinette Langer again, looking beautiful as always. All right. Now, here is the Super Samar. Well, Sugi signed basically a whole bunch of uncut Federal Reserve notes. They were uncut and uncirculated, the real deal, watermarks and everything. For me, it would be impossible to get hold of something like this unless you're incredibly well connected. So what we're doing now is kind of weighing up and summing up some of the evidence with regards to whether this is legitimate or not, okay? And of course, it made it into the local papers in Indonesia, this Super Samar event, talking about human obligation payments 1 to 11. Here's some more of the delegates who made it to the Super Samar. Over here, we got Jagamara, of course. This lady here, Natalie, who I'm going to talk a little bit about as well. This is Mr. Aprianto, Rob Fletcher, Arnie Forrest. Right, as I said, a number of delegates went over to Indonesia expecting to stay there for 3 months because that's what they were told, expecting there to be money and accommodation, and there was nothing, okay? And a number of delegates overstayed their visas because they had no money to get home, and as a result, they were deported. Particularly the African delegates were deported as illegal migrant workers. You can see here, it looks like a security guard holding all their passports because they're not going to give it back to them until they get onto the frickin' plane. With them was Celeste Santos, who wasn't even a delegate, went there and got deported with the rest of these people. Here's Ashton there without his cross, Antoinette Langer, Norman, and Anthea. I just love how in good spirits they are considering they were getting deported. And this particular picture, Antoinette being taken away after being seized for deportation. Brilliant photo, Antoinette. I just absolutely love this picture of you. It's absolutely gorgeous, really. The Swissindo delegation is full of attention seekers and posers who all pretended to care about truth, justice, and fairness, but in truth are some of the most corrupt, manipulative, ego-driven, power-hungry people I've ever come across, sometimes telling the most ghastly lies about people in order to get other people into conflicts in order to fulfill their particular self-indulgent agendas. Being part of the delegation was one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. We were constantly manipulated, used, and abused. When we saw corruption and injustice and we tried to call it out, we were removed. And this is the pattern constantly. And we still see it happening even after we stop participating in the delegation. We have people coming to us constantly telling us about this still going on. just a recap. We began working on the delegation in June 2013. In June 2013, we were all told we were going to Indonesia and that we were going to get our 1.2 million per annum and diplomatic passports, complete with diplomatic immunity. The constant lies caused much delays and havoc in people's lives. We were told on New Year's Eve 2013, going into 2014, that we were going to be going to Cirebon for the Super Sama on the 11th of March 2014. As time grew closer, nothing materialized. Secret meetings were held and only some delegates got prior knowledge of events and others were left behind. We were absolutely devastated after having worked so long, bearing in mind that we created the website and 10 videos and done all the interviews and everything. And we had literally, anyone will tell you, there's nobody on the delegation that worked harder than Biggie and I at that point. A number of delegates went to Indonesia with no resources, expecting money from Mr. Sugi. Several delegates got stuck with no money and ended up getting deported. Several had given up their jobs and homes to go to the event in Cirebon. And as I said, when we ended up going to Indonesia, there were still delegates there from the Super Sama. And of course, we were left behind, and Biggie and I at the time were squatting a building. This is the inside of it. It's an old pub. Just to show you, there's the old bar, the old beer taps, none of it working, of course. But there's Biggie's side of the office. You can see there, him working. There was absolutely no heating or hot running water. We had to borrow electricity from the next door neighbor when we had no money to pay for it. And here's my side of the office, as you can see, where I ran Freedom Central from. This is the outside of the building, the pub that we squatted. You can see there's the course sign up on the outside. We pretty much used the top floor only, the bottom floor everyone could see into. But this was, the one great thing about it was the view. And this is a photo taken from the outside of the pub. Actually, just it's standing in this spot where I'm standing, taking this picture, just facing the opposite direction. And this is the photo taken at equinox, September equinox. The sun sets directly behind the windmill at equinox, interestingly enough. One of the unfortunate things that happened to Biggie as well during this very traumatic time of being left behind by the delegation was that Biggie got beaten up after saving an old lady from being beaten by 3 Moroccan youths. And they beat the crap out of him. They stole his sunglasses and a silver chain from his neck, which my mom gave him, and basically left him unconscious on the pavement. When he came to, you can see this lovely big lump on his forehead from where he hit the pavement. But, I mean, this is all just superficial. This all cleared up. It was the internal injuries which were the worst, because he ended up getting the worst bladder and kidney infection you can imagine, and almost ended up on dialysis, but we couldn't afford to take him to hospital because we had no health insurance. And eventually it was a bottle of colloidal silver given to us by one of the people who lived next door on a boat in the canals that actually gave us a big bottle of colloidal silver, which is the thing in the end that actually saved Biggie's kidneys and bladder. And it was really due to the kindness of strangers that Biggie is now alive. And really, we were in such a bad way. Not only were we struggling to get Biggie well with no health insurance and our dreams of Indonesia had been dashed, we had waited so long for Swissindo to happen that we had got to the point where we had no more money, no food, could not pay the rent, the electricity had been cut, and we were borrowing power from the neighbors. Out of desperation, I stole food from a supermarket and got caught. It's the first time I've ever done that, and the only time I will ever do that. Currently, I'm not very good at stealing things, especially when there's cameras everywhere. We were surviving off the kindness of strangers, literally. The same neighbors who gave us the colloidal silver regularly bought me big pots of chicken soup. Our association with Swissindo attracted a lot of attention from the truth alternative media community here in Holland. Many people wanted to use us to get close to Mr. Sino. In fact, we were approached and given an offer of financial assistance, plus an opportunity to go to Indonesia and see what it was all about for ourselves. And in hindsight, this was an offer we should have refused, but we didn't. So Biggie and I went to Indonesia. this was the highlight of my year last year, just simply because I had not been anywhere in almost 4 years. Quite literally had no money, been running Freedom Central on the bones of our asses. And, when you're given an opportunity for international travel, especially, at that stage we'd been working for the Swissindo delegation for a year. And it was just like infighting after infighting after infighting, and drama after drama, muppet after muppet, lie after lie, manipulation after manipulation, still no money. We had not been able to get to Super Samar, and it was like a dream come true when we were given the opportunity. So this is the first day in Jakarta, and it was truly amazing. We had a great time. All the street kids, really, really great. So we took a long train ride from Jakarta to Cirebon in the boiling heat. It was insane. And I must just say, this train journey, I cried nearly the whole way, just to see the absolute poverty and destitution that these people are living in. Really heartbreaking. Just something I can't reconcile in my own mind, how we've allowed humanity to degenerate to that so far. Anyway, after a long and tiring journey from Jakarta by train, we arrived in Cirebon, and here's Biggie and I outside Cirebon train station, very happy. Beg your pardon. And then we went and stayed at the Santika Hotel, and we had a delegation of people. Mr. Sugi's entourage came out to meet us at the hotel. Here's Mr. Hananto, several other people. Here's myself and Biggie. You can tell Biggie because he's so big compared to all these other Indonesians. And, of course, Mark Anthony Collins over here. We've got Jagamara over here, and Melky, very sweet guy. And this is, of course, we then got invited to Mr. Sugi's home. They came to pick us up, took us there. And this is Papa looking very amused at me playing with the owl, which Jagamara had found was now rearing in Papa Sugi's home. You can see big rings under my eyes. Absolutely exhausted the whole time I was there. Like constantly drained. I'll get into that a bit more. And Biggie and I were given a set of diplomatic cards. These diplomatic cards actually have the exact same number on them. Everybody's IDs have different numbers on, but our diplomatic cards have the exact same number on them. And from what I understand, everyone else's diplomatic cards have the same number too. So I don't know how real these are, but nonetheless, we were given diplomatic cards. We've not yet seen diplomatic passports. Obviously, I also got the chance to interview Mr. Sugi, and it was more like he gave a speech, which we then had to have translated, and we released his official press release on the godskyearth.org website. This is Mr. Sugi's entrusted entourage, Mr. Hananta Saptohan over here, Mr. Wong Aprianto, or Mr. Apri, and this is Mr. Yoko Widodo. This Yoko Widodo is not the president of Indonesia. We had a guy called Yoko Widodo who won the recent presidential elections in Indonesia. It's not the same guy. Let's just be clear. I really loved all three of these people. Just absolutely amazingly beautiful beings, and really enjoyed spending time with them. This picture of Papa Sugi's outside area. It's a bit like a temple, really. Everyone speaks just above a whisper, and got to take your shoes off, and it's excruciatingly hot at all times. There's always lots of water on the table. Okay, some interesting people. Here's Jagamara giving Biggie some kind of Aborigine shamanic treatment. You can see Biggie's in a lot of pain there. But yeah, this is around the poolside at our hotel. This is in Papa Sugi's home. I want to talk a little bit about these two people. This is a guy called Andrew who came to join Jagamara, who was already staying too long at Papa Sugi's house, came to stay with Jagamara at Papa Sugi's house. And this is Natalie, who is or was Jagamara's girlfriend. At the time, I'm not sure what they were, but they were for a while, or they weren't. They're not anymore. I'm not sure. But I just want to say I really like Natalie. I really connected with her. She's a really lovely lady. I spent a lot of time with her, talking to her. and very fond of her indeed. And she's one of the people who suffered greatly for having made the pilgrimage to Indonesia. She got her kids taken away from her as well as a result of not being around to deal with existing custody issues that she should have dealt with. Now, this is my absolute favorite person that I met in Indonesia, Mr. Sumadi Dojo, affectionately referenced as Mr. Mahdi. He is the top guy in the pyramidal hierarchical structure when it comes to Swissindo media, head of Swissindo media, and then he appointed me as sort of person underneath him in charge of the 5 continents, head of media for the 5 kingdoms, as it's put in the official paperwork. But just absolutely love this dude. And what he did, he wore an Amsterdam t-shirt. And this t-shirt was actually given to him by his late wife, who has since passed on. It's a very special t-shirt to him. But he wore it especially because we came from Holland. I just adore this man. He used to bring us food around the poolside for us to eat. Wow, very, very special person. Looked after us the whole time we were there. The wonderful Mr. Mahdi, always with us. We used to go have dinner. He lives in this back part here. And there's a restaurant in front of his house, and we used to go to the restaurant in front of his house every evening for dinner and have dinner with him. It was just absolutely lovely. Indonesian food is so yummy. And even the day we left Cirebon, this is the train station, he took us to the train station, and you can see he's got the One People t-shirt on there, but just without a doubt one of the most beautiful human beings on the planet. And I was very sad to learn was how he had been used and abused by Swissindo. Mr. Mahdi was paying the quarters where Mr. Aprianto was staying, the compound where Mr. Aprianto and a couple of Papasugi's entourage were staying. Mr. Mahdi was paying out of his pension, paying the rent. He was paying some of the electrical bills and stuff at Papa's house. And when he refused to pay for the air conditioning bill, they basically, Papa and the rest of the people became very nasty towards Mr. Mahdi. Apparently they became very unpleasant towards him and pushed him away, which I thought was rather shocking considering how generous he had been to them and just how much of a point he made of looking after the delegates and being a true host and a diplomat for everybody. You know, not just us. When Sasha Stone and Avi went there, he looked after them. The same when the other delegates went for the Super Samal, he looked after them. Very special place in my heart for this man, and he's been very much used for his money to pay bills and poorly treated when he couldn't afford to pay others. Love you, Mr. Mahdi. Anyway, Biggie got to celebrate his birthday in Cirebon. And this is my big boy crying because the hotel staff at the hotel were just absolutely fantastic. We just loved Cirebon. The Indonesian people were just wonderful. And here for breakfast, they bought Biggie a cake. And he had a lot of cake that day because we had another big cake made, and Papa Sugi's entourage came down to the hotel to have cake and coffee with us there. Yeah, it was really a very special day. Now, it wasn't all fun and games. We did a lot of work. This is a picture of Biggie investigating some of the paperwork. Obviously, that's what we went there to do, was to kind of work out whether these things are legitimate or not. So Biggie spent many hours working through paperwork with Mr. Sino and Mr. Hananto in the hopes of being able to action some of the banking instruments being offered. Okay? All sorts of strange excuses and promises are made. None of them materialized, including offering us a trip to America, telling us that we needed to go on a trip to the Vatican on behalf of Papa, offering us all sorts of banker's drafts, and then a banker's draft for something like $10 million was being sent to our hotel room, and that never arrived. And there were all sorts of strange things which happened, which by the time we left, we just kind of left scratching our head with more questions than we went there with, to be honest. Of course, I got to do my investigative thing as well. And this is a Jack Bauer suitcase. And Jack Bauer is a character for 24. You can kind of see the 24 logo there, which contained a number of currencies from different places. And of course, I took the opportunity to dismantle some of the packs and look through the currencies and flick through them, which I want to see if these things are real. I actually think they didn't expect me to do that. But what I will say is the smaller node currencies, a couple of them, the smaller packs of currencies had watermarks in. It was when they started pulling out the ridiculous size $1 million notes when I couldn't find the watermark. And when I pointed out there was no watermark, Papa actually took it and dipped it in with some water and says, look, the paper's not falling apart because it's proper money printing paper. But I'm not sure if that's, a scientific method for checking if money is fraudulent or not, to be honest with you. So here I am playing with some of the different things that were there to play with, the different monies, seeing with different packs of different currencies. Examined all of them closely. These ones all seem legitimate. Some of these seem legitimate. Now, this is the unfortunate thing. And I need to get serious with people here. After our trip to Indonesia, there was a huge amount of backlash. Okay. When I got back from Indonesia, I posted my interview with Papa Sugi and an article regarding my experiences of the trip. The result of this article was an unexplainable backlash, which resulted in a letter being written to Papa Sugi. And this letter was actually written on behalf of all the delegates. And this letter called for me to be removed as the head of media for the Five Kingdoms. Some of the claims made included the fact that it was referenced that I had been ritually abused, something which is now public knowledge. I came out about that earlier on this year. But they further went on to use the excuse this excuse as a reason for me being removed, claiming that I've been recruited from a young age and that I was involved in some kind of satanic activity. But this is actually just because I had been interviewing victims of satanic ritual abuse and getting all their information to bring before tribunals, okay? Just getting all the data together. A number of delegates came forward to state that they had not signed off on this letter. They did not know about the contents of it, nor did they agree with the contents. Okay, so a letter was drafted, and it was the whole campaign was largely fueled by Gwen Caldwell and Ross Hanley, who both had their titles removed by Papa Sugi because of all the conflict that caused in the delegation. And this was done afterwards, not in relation to my incident. This was actually after I pulled away from the delegation completely. So there was a lot of backhandedness and nastiness and unfairness going on. Now, this is the thing about ritual abuse victims, myself having worked with many of them, okay, and having to encourage many of them to come forward with their stories. It takes a lot of courage to tell the story, okay? It's not that people don't want to tell the story, okay, it's not that they don't want others to hear it. They very desperately want people to hear it so that people can know of the atrocities. Most of them are actually, when I ask them, well, what's stopping you? Most of them say, well, we're afraid of what people will say and that people will treat us like, we're freaks and that we're losers or that we're messed up. People, and what I have observed is people generally tend to label these people like that and then treat them like that, okay? Which is, as far as I'm concerned, sad. And these people are very much afraid of coming out and talking about it for fear of being labeled as damaged or messed up by ignorant gossipers or onlookers. Now, why this is relevant is because obviously I've come out and very hard to tell the story of what happened to me, and people use this against me. And it was actually at this stage, I hadn't come out publicly about it. People knew this information because Rena Eliades had blurted it out to everybody in Australian delegation meeting. And then this information was then used against me, twisted and used as an excuse to try and get me out the delegation. Very sick and very, very sad. As I've already spoken about, ritual abuse victims are most afraid of the fact that they've been abused being used against them, which is why a lot of them don't come out and talk about it. Okay, so the very thing that prevents people from speaking about this thing was the very thing that I was subjected to in the delegation. Now I want to talk about the patsies, the poor patsies. These two women, two extremely beautiful people, Karen Colland and Cindy K. Currier, both extremely intelligent, extremely kind people who, I don't know what it is. It's like Papa targets someone in particular. And at first it was Karen Collin, made her the Queen of Queens or something like that, gave her that title and gave her all these powers to do this, to do that, to this, that. And when Karen actually challenged Papa on a few things, this is very, very interesting to note. When Papa was actually challenged, Papa Sugi was actually challenged on a few things by Karen, he turned around and denounced her completely. And she was called into a meeting with Daryl Zeleny and Jagamara where they completely ripped into her. And the questions she was asking were very legitimate and real questions, and in fact, questions that other delegates were asking as well. And we were very proud of her being the Queen of Queens, actually standing up and saying, well, look, this and this and this. And it didn't go over at all well with the power structure. And since she's kind of been relegated, now there's a new one, the Syndicate Courier, who has accepted, Papa's offer on behalf of humanity and all of this. You know what? I want to say to both these two ladies, they've both been used as absolute patsies, and they are making complete fools of themselves in public. Right? I think Karen's realized that she was used, and that when she actually did something useful with her position of trying to get some closure or get some truth or get something moving, okay, she was just completely slammed down. And what's really sad is the morning that I was supposed to present Conscious Consumer Network, the channel, and all the features to the delegates, they actually cancelled my presentation so that they could pull Karen Collin into a meeting and crap all over her for daring to ask questions which needed to be asked. Okay, so let's take a look at the evidence that is tangible and which actually does exist. And let's try to work out what it actually means. First, we need to ask, is Swissindo really part of the United Nations? For me, it's still unclear. I have seen nothing that confirms or denies the fact that Swissindo has any connections to the United Nations other than they say so, and that they printed on cloths which they hang up on podiums with sellotape, that they printed on letterheaded paper which they create with images they download off the internet. So the question still remains as to the legitimacy of the diplomatic paperwork, all right? The cards we have, all the diplomatic cards all have the same numbers, and I've never come across an ID or a passport that has the same number as somebody else's. They're all required to have their own individual numbers, which throws up real questions about the legitimacy of these cards. Some delegates have used the paperwork and cards to get themselves out of sticky situations, and that's, if you're a good talker, that's good. But some delegates thought it was get out of jail free card and did stupid things like start driving around without license plates on altogether, and they got caught and thrown in jail for a month and thought they could get out because they were diplomats. But anyway, when Daryl Zeleny was recently asked, and this is very recently, if the diplomatic paperwork was real, his response was, prove that it's not real, okay, stating that he didn't know if it was real, but because we couldn't prove that it was not real, we were working on the grounds of assumption, presumption. This is all we're working with, but that is all any paperwork is presumption. Now, recently, Swissindo had another big do, which happened in Laos, and a whole bunch of delegates went over there. Jagamara, after having left Indonesia last year, after having had the Australian embassy bail him out of Indonesia, could not leave to go to this event. And basically all that happened was Swissindo opened up a sole company in Laos. And it's the same as, Vicky and I have a company which is registered in the UK, a limited company. And it's pretty much doing the same thing. It's just opening up a company in another country. And, not that we make any money out of a limited company in the UK, it's just a safe way to safeguard all the websites that we have, is to put them under the limited company, limited liability. We can't have one of those in Holland. You can only have one in the UK. So we have a limited company. It's the same as opening up a sole mandate company or any other kind of company. It's just a type of company category that fits into a specific category with certain specifications under that particular label. They opened up a company in another country. It's not a big deal. all right? But everybody kind of went gaga over this. It doesn't really mean very much at all. When we actually emailed Mr. Aprianta after this whole thing to find out what had happened, we said, so is there any movement of money? He says, no. Has anything been released yet? No, nothing's happened. No money, still waiting. So that's the way it stands. Okay. Now, when I was in Papasugi's home, I took a nice little walk around to see what evidence I could find of anything to do with Swissindo. Now, I did find this painting, which I thought was rather interesting. Okay, and basically this refers to the NKRI Treaty, which was signed in 2010 by the then Pope, the Queen of England, and all sorts, which apparently is a treaty which signs over the global assets to Papasugi. Okay, and this appears in a painting. Now, this is not just something you can print up overnight. This is a painting that took a lot of time to do. So for me, I looked at this and I was like, okay, interesting. All right. But this is where things get precarious. There is absolutely no trace of this big bullion bank, okay, that they keep referring to. All right. There's the only web presence of this bullion bank that referred to here, which you often see being referred to as Kinkana Room 1A. All right. Kinkana Room 1A is actually a conference room in a hotel where they apparently once met. It's not actually anything to do with the big bullion bank or anything. In fact, we can't find the bullion bank they're referring to. Okay, there's the UBS, which is the bullion bank in Switzerland. But this bullion bank, the only web presence we can find is a blog, not even a website, a blog, and the blog is actually registered to Mr. Sino, and there's like no entries on it at all. Apart from that, there's no web presence or no evidence anywhere that this bullion bank actually exists. And when going through Mr. Sugi's house or Mr. Sino's house, the only evidence that I actually found of Swissindo actually existing, apart from hats, paperwork, websites, and the things that any one of us can make happen in a flash. This was the only other thing that I found to prove that Swissindo actually exists, which was a hat rack with the Swissindo letters actually in brass nailed on to this hat rack. Okay. Now, this isn't terribly hard to make, and you can do this within a couple of hours to make something like this. All right, not even a printed sign from a sign-making shop. This is a homemade jobby. Okay. Now, no, I never saw an office. I never saw premises. There was a lot of talk about towers that they had been given in Jakarta, and they promised me a studio there for Swissindo Media and all sorts. But again, we've seen none of that materialize. This is the only evidence that I saw of anything that Swissindo actually exists, apart from maybe the odd Swissindo hat, Swissindo t-shirt. That's about it. And of course, the banking instruments. Oh, the beloved banking instruments. Do me a favor. There are literally dozens of these things floating around, apparently signed by all sorts of interesting people. Ban Ki-moon, President of the World Bank, Chairman of the International Criminal Court, Dominic Strauss-Kahn. Now, let me just say, Dominic Strauss-Kahn is no longer the head of the International Monetary Fund, which means that this banking document is old, all right? Yet it's recently been posted, and it makes the rounds on social media, all right? Like it's the latest thing, and everyone gets, oh, look at this, look at this, look at this, and they repost it, and, oh, things are happening, things are moving. No, it's old documents that are being recirculated, all right? Yeah, we've got Queen Elizabeth, British royal family. This is part of the NKRI Treaty, right, which basically is part of handing over the global collateral, global assets and collateral accounts to the single signatory, which is supposedly Papasugi. So we've seen lots of this sort of stuff. We've been through lots of this sort of stuff, and yet no funding has been released. The only proof that exists that the funds or the gold exists that we've seen to date is this. What we've seen, which is various stacks of different kinds of currency in one suitcase, and of course these piles of gold. Some of them don't even look that real. They've got a very telltale wearing on the side. But to me, gold, now from what I understand, gold bars normally on curved areas would be shiny, not going black like this. This looks to me like these are gold-plated, tungsten steel on the inside of gold-plated bars. But anyway, this is apparently the gold bars. And it's supposed to be caves of these, tons and tons of this gold, which is supposed to underwrite all this money that Papa wants to give back to humanity. This is what it was all about for me, okay? I've come to my experience that it's about energetic vampiring. The entire Swissindo endeavor, complete with the promised release of payments 1 to 11, it has, in my opinion, been nothing more than an exercise in energetic vampirism. The moment we've got a bunch of delegates resigning, or it seems like all the delegates are going to quit, all of a sudden, oh, no, it's, we're going to make a statement, and there's new documents being released and new artwork being made. And, every time it seems that, oh, we're losing momentum, they chuck a whole bunch of, Jane Evershed makes some new artwork. Papa releases, oh, no, we forced them. They've got to do it by this date in August. And we've heard this all before, okay? It really, in my opinion, is nothing more than an exercise in energetic vampirism. The delegates are constantly told all attention must be on Papa. Everyone must focus their energy on Papa to make this happen, all right? Let me tell you, when I went to Indonesia and I sat with Papa Sugi in that temple he has outside, every time I sat there, I felt completely drained. It was always a struggle to keep my eyes open. And I don't know if it was the heat or if perhaps because of the jet lag. But I tell you what, I didn't feel that way when I was at the hotel. It was only ever I felt exhausted and absolutely drained sitting with Papa. And what I found was, like, for example, one day when I went and sat in the kitchen to talk to Natalie and Papa was outside, he summoned me. He sent one of his lackeys to come and get me, to come and says Papa wants to talk to me. And I was dragged out of a conversation with Natalie, and I was told to go sit in front of Papa, where he proceeded to monologue at me for 3 hours. And it was just barely louder than a whisper, and I'm completely deaf in one ear. And his English is really poor. So I don't even know what he said that day. But as I sat there, I just felt the life leaving my body. I felt like I had been called away from Natalie because I had not been giving him enough attention. And that is really how I felt. The facts, here are the facts, guys. Swissindo and those that known as the delegates have become an epic energetic vampiring exercise. Many hours of media and promotional material has been made, yet nothing has materialized. No money has been released, no movements of funds. We've seen nothing. 2 years down the line, it's 2 years since I started with the delegates, nothing. There's a whole bunch of hoo-ha. Many facts and structures are still unclear. How do we counteract energetic vampirism? Well, it's quite simple, by not paying attention or energy to the parasite. Nobody with any credibility in media will give them any notice due to the constant broken promises, non-deliverance, and constant drama from the delegation. Only parasites pay energy into parasites because they feed off each other. Birds of a feather flock together. Media is the very art of human study, and it's always interesting to see how people of similar ethics or lack thereof seem always to stick together. Indeed, bullshitters stick with bullshitters. And of course, the real race to the bottom came from these guys, Expanding You, who decided after I posted that I was going to be doing this series today, and I did post it early on in the week to give due notice to everybody that I was going to do it, they decided to interview the delegates and posted yesterday the interview. Even though they know I'm the head of media, but I wouldn't have given them the interview, nor would I have interviewed the delegates. So I got the opinion that they were deliberately trying to annoy me, or, just wasn't working at all, actually. I just found it quite amusing. This attempt at a shot across the bow. Sorry, guys, it didn't work. All it did was make you look very, very stupid. Let's have a look at a few things that need to be pointed out, shall we? Okay. And this goes on to the next point, which is the over-labeling of things. A lot of people have been given titles, and people seem to think if they slap a title on themselves, that everyone else will believe they are that thing that the title says, right? And these people worked on my network, all right? This expanding new crew, which includes India Irene, Carrie Ellis, and Camilla Bowman, who all interviewed the Australian delegation in a clip which was posted on the 2nd of July. After I had said that I was going to make the series, they did this deliberately. If I had not said I was going to do this, they wouldn't have interviewed the Australian delegation, because I tell you, it was a cringeworthy interview. Anyway, here is an example of what I'm going to be talking about, which is the over-application of labels, all right, where people apply so many labels to themselves because they want to create this image of their external locus of identity that they want other people to buy into, but it's not necessarily true. Okay, a good example of this is how Jagamara claims to be the international prime minister of law, yet his girlfriend comes to Biggie and I for legal advice now that she's trying to get her children back. Okay, so she doesn't even go to the international prime minister of law. So the whole thing is a bit of a joke, really. And I guess this is why India, Cami, and Kerry decided to interview the delegation, is because, the delegates on all their labels and their fancy titles, these guys are just the same. When they worked on network, and I had to put these slides into their introductions, which I made, I tell you, I cringed, because this is completely contrary to the consciousness with which Conscious Consumer Network was created. Okay, here we go again. I'll give you an example. Carrie Ellis, global visionary, creative wizardry, author extraordinaire, not just an author. I can't even read some. This is just so new age buzzwordy, neurolinguistic programming. It actually makes me a little bit nauseous. Same with this lady, Camilla Bowman. She once said to me that she never had to read anything because she could just look at a page and know what it says. And yet I've seen her post things like, for example, Joko Widodo, Delegate Joko Widodo becomes the new president of Prime Minister of Indonesia. No, it's two different Joko Widodos. And she didn't even bother reading or researching, nothing, before she goes posting and stuff. So many times I've had to call her up on it. And when India wanted to bring her into our network, I was like, no, this one just doesn't, it's all about talking shit. It just really is. All these labels, this is there to make other people think that's what she is, and that's not what she is. She's none of these things. I've worked with these people for weeks and weeks and weeks, listened to their broadcasts. It's all pretentious, fake, superficial garb. One last thing I wanted to say about this particular lady, okay, and it ties into the theme of ritual abuse thing that I spoke about earlier. When she left our network, she actually went to Biggie and said, good luck with that mess, referencing the fact that I had been abused. And, she also called Biggie a Stepford wife. And when Biggie looked up that title, he's laughing. When Biggie looked up that title, it said Stepford wife, docile and submissive. And anybody that knows Biggie knows he's certainly not docile and submissive. So she just really, insulted him, insulted our marriage, which nobody has the right to do. Nobody knows what goes on between myself and my husband. We've had our ups and downs, but after 14 years of marriage, we're happier than we've ever been. And we work, all right? We absolutely work. And it's not for anyone to judge that. We run a very successful project. It's extremely stressful, and we managed to do it. So, attacking my husband, attacking my marriage, after all he did was put up with weeks and weeks of her endless fucking self-centered drivel on our network, it was very, very shameful. I think the real race at the bottom was having a go at me about being messed up because I've been abused and stuff. So that's the reason why ritual abuse victims don't want to come out and give their evidence, is because of little bitches like this coming out and saying nasty shit that is hurtful. Label and brand indoctrinations. Okay? The creation of words express ideas and concepts. Often brands and labels are put on certain objects to create certain impressions in the minds of others who associate certain brands with certain values. These brand values are meticulously crafted in the commercial world to drive consumerism and create a public addicted to these concepts and ideologies, which ultimately feeds the consumer machine we are effectively trying to eliminate in the new paradigm. So excessive branding and labeling is contra to new paradigm media, okay? Which is why these lovely ladies, they're just feeding the old shit with this new age buzzword label bullshit, really. Now, as a former stylist and art director, and I worked in mainstream media in London, I also worked as the art director for Coca-Cola, amongst many other very big brands and companies. Just so everybody knows, Coca-Cola is the most recognizable brand name and brand label on the planet. And much of my knowledge of labeling and branding contributed to the fact that I got the job as art director for commercial trade press. And this is a shoot that I actually art directed, okay? And it was through the concepts of labeling that I first started to awaken, because as a fashion stylist and art director, I saw how easy it is to create something, an illusion, okay? An absolute illusion. And there's a whole story behind this picture, which I won't get into, of what was going on. And this is actually the end of the day of a shoot. And this is the model's own clothes, because we had been through all the clothes and used all the clothes of various shoots, and they just decided to wear their own for the very last frame we had to do. And big story behind this. But what's interesting to know is that you wouldn't think that they had necessarily dressed themselves. You think they'd been dressed by a stylist or whatever, but it's besides the point. Simple thing is, it's an illusion. All right, a lot of this is just illusion. You put a brand on a certain item of clothing, and it creates certain ideas in the minds of people about who you are and what you represent. You know, oh, she wears Chanel, she must be rich, she must be successful. And it's all that kind of bullshit, external locus of identity, ego crap. That's all labels are, okay? Just by having a word on a label, okay, on an item of clothing, we portray ourselves in a certain way. It is through the concept of labeling that I first came to understand just how we've been manipulated on this planet. And if anyone wants to learn a little bit more about this, they can read about the consumer con in my book, The South African Guide to the Global Conspiracy, book one, Light and Dark, available for download. Free ebook copies available on my website, freedomcentral.info. The bottom line is, people actually always underestimate me. I know the true value of titles and words and the limitations they bring. Okay, and I myself would be happy to relinquish any title. Okay, I would give up my role as head of media or whatever. In fact, it's just a title. I've still to this day not really practically fulfilled any value other than starting Conscious Consumer Network. In fact, I'm the only person within the delegation to actually start a project that's actually working and effective. So a lot of them just sat around causing drama instead. But I realized that it's in doing things. It's not having names and titles. In fact, you know, Kate of Guy says, lose the name, win the game. I would happily give up my name. I think titles are very limiting. And if anybody has been going through my Dragonology series, you'll understand this is not just me stating crap. I have meticulously dissected the English language and proven why concepts and labels are misleading by looking at etymological roots of words, all right? And particularly things like emperor, if you look at the etymology of it, or dragon etymology, it's all very misleading. It's all there designed to get people to behave a certain way towards certain things because certain ideologies are associated with certain labels. It's all about cultural programming. It's all about indoctrination. And that's what we're trying to move away from. Now, we're talking about these guys over here, okay, Camilla Bowman, Carrie Ellis, and this little sweetheart, India Irie. Now, they obviously typically fall into what I call the self-help new age guru categories or therapists, and they started their own little situation now with Naturally Better TV. And to be honest with you, the more alternative media, the better. We need more alternative media. But these self-help channels and stuff are dangerous, okay? We have a very dear friend, Linda, who's dying of cancer because she's been following the crap from these three new age ladies and all their self-help doctors and new age gurus who have done absolutely nothing for this woman, okay? She's getting sicker and sicker and she's dying, all right? And because she's believed in them. These people are dangerous, all right? The simple fact about these gurus and new age therapists and whatever else they claim, 21st century superhuman. Most of these people, most therapists, to be honest with you, I've never met a therapist that didn't need a therapist. And one of the things I've learned from Carrie Ellis, thank you, Carrie, is that we teach best what we ourselves need to learn. Nobody can help you. You can only help yourself. Stop looking for a savior. Stop thinking Swissindo is the savior. Look within. Create the world you want to live in. Remember always to check the facts. Nothing discredits one more in the media than deliberate negligence when it comes to fact-checking before broadcasting, publishing, or posting. It is not always possible to get facts correct all the time, but due diligence needs to be paid to the process of information dissemination, and do as much as possible to ensure the accuracy in facts. And you know what? We've just gotten to a point where we say, no more bullshit. I do not consent. I will not be manipulated. I will not be used. I will not have people harness my energy, my energetic currency, my creative output for their own benefit. People stealing my work, people coming into my network, trying to break apart my network and stealing presenters and all sorts. You know, it's very sad that you people exist, to be honest with you. You're just complete sociopaths who do nothing but vampire of good people. It's extremely traumatic to work with these kind of people, but what I've learned a lot is what I don't want to be working with. All the trauma, drama, distraction, energetic vampiring, and conflict has been extremely devastating to a number of people who have served as delegates. The direct cause of this conflict is the appointment of a group of people under false pretenses who are unqualified for the roles and who are fighting to be recognized, all right? And this has been, the appointment's been done through labels. Many of these people have been caught up in the karmic backlash of poor management and leadership, not to mention blatant injustice and abuse of power. Those with power have abused it over and over again. Those that stand up and don't agree get marginalized or ostracized or kicked out the delegation. Message to Mr. Sino. If you have any honor in you at all, you will dissolve the current delegation. If and when funding becomes available, then spend the resources recruiting the right people for the right positions. Interviews and committees to establish such matters are necessary, and it takes resources to establish those various committees. You have to fly around and get the right people together. People can't just be picked willy-nilly from Facebook to become the emperor or prime minister of a portfolio. And this kind of just willy-nilly picking and appointing and giving random titles to people, that doesn't give Swissindo any credibility. Due diligence needs to be paid in selecting the right people for the right job. If Swissindo was in any way serious about what they were doing, they would care more about who and what they select to represent them instead of continuing to work with incompetent bullshitters and egos that are causing damage. So we need to abolish the titles, all titles. This over-labeling of things is just ridiculous, okay? Mr. Sino tried to offer me a title and I turned it down because I don't believe in them, okay? The implementation of titles and hierarchy creates an opportunity for the abuse of power. Titles are limiting. They create ideas that are falsely perceived to be real, and thus we treat them as if they are real and necessary when they're not. They're illusions, they're words, they're letters, they're characters, symbols stuck together to convince us of certain facts which aren't true. Many of the delegates who have been given titles blatantly abuse them, resulting in many delegates suffering as a result. Titles have no place in a free, fair, sustainable world, which can only be achieved through equality for all. The most important lesson I learned from my time in the Swissindo delegation is to stand up for what you believe in, even if you are standing alone. And of course, every cloud has a silver lining. It wasn't all doom and gloom. Being appointed as the head of media for the Five Kingdoms, I went and did a lot of research into how I would go about creating a new paradigm of media should funding become released. did a whole bunch of research, thousands and thousands of pages. But when money was not forthcoming, we simplified the project to something that's manageable. And we looked at how can we create accessible tools for those people who are working hard to bring truth on the ground, the alternative media. So we simplified the project and we made it happen. And we've been running very successfully for 6 months. We've got some amazing new broadcasters coming on in July. We've got recycling content at the moment. And we've just had the Tug Symposium, which was a smash hit success. And we thank everybody who has broadcasted with us, those who have come and gone. We've also realized that we work better with some people than with others. Not everybody is going to be able to meet the high standard we've developed here on CCN, which is by far the highest standard in alternative media. And we thank you to everybody who has tuned into CCN and supported our network over the last 6 months. And we guarantee you the next 6 months are going to be absolutely stellar. Would like to point out that there's no membership necessary to view our channel because we believe membership is one step to hierarchy, you know, special little cliquey clubs where only certain people can view content. No, we believe information is the common heritage of all beings, which is why CCN does not require people to have a membership to view our content. You can become a monthly pleasure and then get access to our high definition downloads, but there's no membership to any special elite little clubs. All shows are live streamed in high definition. The live stream is free to view with pause and rewind functions. All shows are archived in standard broadcast quality and are available to view on YouTube, and anybody can access those for free. High definition downloads are available at Ethymarket, and all you need to do is pledge €10 a month and get unlimited access to all the HD downloads at ethymarket.com. And of course, you can also access all the Tug Symposium events, all the speakers that were, and I really recommend if you missed the Tug events that you catch up on all the speakers that were there because we're going to be doing loads more of those. All available in high definition at ethymarket.com. Please support Conscious Consumer Network, guys. This was an amazing project to get off the ground and keep running for this long. Trust me, media is a very, very difficult path, challenging. It's a cosmic gauntlet. A lot of people are in it for the wrong reasons, to create their own brands, super brands, their own pseudo celebrities. This is not why we created a platform. We did not create this platform to create celebrities for other people. We create this platform to bring freeing and empowering information to people. Please, guys, support the network and our network support fund. And remember, all shows are available in high definition from ethymarket.com, and Ethymarket is available, is the ethical marketplace for conscious consumers. We have a lot of amazing products on there, including argan oil and books and all sorts, so please do go check it out. And of course, we thank you for supporting free and independent media. And that's it from me, guys. Until next time, we'll see you again on Conscious Consumer Network. Good night.